Okay, we're going to have a look at an ordinary level suspense account question. Um, the question itself is quite simplistic, but this is an important video to teach the system of how you answer suspense accounts. So let's first off have a look at the question and what it says. It says the trial balance of Anne Fogarty failed to agree at the 31st of the 12th, 2014. Now, what does that mean? That means that her accounts did not balance for some reason. The debits and the credits did not match. So the difference, whatever that might be, €100, €200, whatever it might be, was entered into a suspense account. So a suspense account is just a place where you put in an error number to make your accounts balance, and then you can come back at a later time to see what the errors actually were. On examination of the books, the following errors were revealed. So we've actually found 5 mistakes, which when we go about rectifying these mistakes and journalizing them, then our accounts will be correct again. And that's part A, to journalize the corrections, and then part B is to prepare a net profit, a corrected net profit. We'll deal with that when we get to it. So I'm going to flick away from the question now, but you guys will have the question on paper in front of you, and I'm going to look at the answer instead. So here is the way you set up a suspense account question. You already have the template on this. You should have 3 columns: what should have happened, what actually happened, and then the correction required, which is the journal. And then on a separate page, um, I'm doing it here for visual purposes, but on a separate page you have your general journal, which is details, debit and credit, and these things must match. I have the answers in here already, but I'm going to show you where I got them from. So the first error from the question said goods sold on credit to Waldron Limited for 11,300 had not been entered in the books. Now, if something has not been entered in the books, then that's what we call an error of omission. It has been completely left out. And you have your definitions of errors on Google Classroom. So what should have happened? This is our happy place where we write down what should have happened. Well, we know that sales is an income, and therefore on the credit side, it should have been 11,300 on the credit side here, and it should have been 11,300 on the debit side of our debtor, who is Waldron Limited. And that's the correct entry for that. What actually happened is that nothing happened, so therefore this is a 0 and a 0. There was no entry of any description here. So therefore, how do we rectify that? What is our correction required? Well, what we need to do is put in what it should have been. So it should have been 11,300 on the credit side of sales, and it should have been 11,300 on the debit side of Waldron. And this column here, this third column, is the important one. It is the correction, and therefore it is what goes to the general journal. So therefore you just write this out in the general journal. You write down sales, a credit of 11.3, Waldron, a debit of 11.3. That comes directly from this column here, the third column. Then you write in a narrative, and the narrative is just explaining what you just did. There's usually 1 mark for each of the narratives. You just write down a correction of the error of the sale of goods to Waldron being omitted from the books. You literally write down what went wrong. Number 1, corrected by being put in, and it's been journalized. So let's go to number 2. Again, you have what should have happened and what actually happened and the correction required. Now, in this case, it says the total of the purchases book was 18,000, but it's been entered in the purchases account as 1,800. Now, purchases is on the debit side, it's an expense. It should have been 18,000, but what actually happened is that it was put in as 1,800. So that is not an error of omission now, that's an error of arithmetic. They've put the wrong number in. So therefore we need to make this 1800 up to 18,000. How do we do that? Well, we need to put something more on the debit side. How much more? Well, how do we bring 1800 up to 18,000? I think that is 16,200 on the debit side. That correction would bring this up to this. So therefore, that is the correction that's required. We're going to journalize that by putting in purchases, 16,200 on the debit side. Now we have nothing to balance this against, but it must balance against something. So when you're in this position, you have this magical thing called a suspense figure. So you have 16,200 on the debit side. We know where that came from our correction, but we have nothing to balance it against. So instead we balance it against a suspense figure. That's one of the errors that was causing the trial balance not to agree. We narrated a correction of the error of purchases total transferred to the purchases account incorrectly. And we look at number 3. Now let's look at number 3, interest. It says interest received of 700 has been treated as interest paid. Well, interest received should have been an income. So it should have been on that side. But it was treated as interest paid, which is an expense. So they actually put the 700 on the wrong side of the account. That's an error of double entry. How do we fix that? How do we take this 700 from the debit side and make it appear on the credit side? Well, a common error would be here, oh, you just put it on there. But actually that is just cancelling the 700 you have. When you wish to switch sides, you have to put in that to bring it back to 0 and then that to bring it to the total, to the correct amount. So actually what we tend to do there is we double to get 1400. We have to put 700 here to cancel what is wrong, and then we have to put another 700 to put in what is right. 1400 in total. That 1400 is journalized here. And again, we have nothing to play that against, so therefore that's a suspense account figure there. 1400 here going to 1400 here. Suspense. Correction of interest received being recorded as interest paid. Number 4. The question says, cash taken by Anne Fogarty for private use has not been entered in the books. Now, if something has not been entered in the books, that's an error of omission. So this has been completely left out. So cash being taken for private use is drawings. So that's €400 coming out of the bank account or the cash account, if you wish to call it that, and should have been put into the drawings account on the debit side. That's what should have happened. What actually happened is that nothing happened. They didn't record it at all. So how do we correct that? Well, we just put in what is correct. And that is 400 here and 400 on the debit side here. And now you journalize this column always. So that's bank of 400 here and drawings of 400 here. And that is the correction of the omission of drawings in cash. And then the last one that we need to do of the 5, it says goods sold on credit to Michael Ryan of €560 have been entered in Michelle Ryan's account. That's what we call an error of commission, because something has been entered in the right account, the right type of account, but just the wrong account. So this has been put into a debtor's account, but they just got the names mixed up because they were so similar. So goods sold on credit, this should be 560, of course. This is what should have happened. And it should have went to Michael Ryan's account on the debit side, 560. And that's what should have happened. Now what actually happened is they did record the sales correctly, but they put it into Michelle's account instead, 560. So how do we solve that? Well, we don't need to touch sales. It's correct. It's as it should have been. But what we do need to do is we need to take out Michael's 560. That €560 there is incorrect. Sorry, excuse me. We need to take out Michelle's 560. She's the person who should not have been recorded. So we take 560 out of hers. That makes her account back to 0. And we actually record the 560 into Michael's account as it should have been. Sales does not need to be altered. It wasn't wrong. You just cancel what was wrong and you put in what should have been, 560. And then when you bring that up here, Michael Ryan has a 560 plus and Michelle Ryan has a 560 of a credit. They're both debtors, but you're just increasing one of them and decreasing the other one. Correction of the error of sales being debited to the wrong debtor. That is the 5 errors now journalized. Now, this blue bit on the right-hand side of your screen, this general journal is really important because each of these figures now will affect your accounts, your net profit, your trading profit and loss account, and your balance sheet. The ones which will affect the trading profit and loss account will be the ones which are prior to the net profit, like sales, and the ones that will affect the balance sheet are the ones which would be in the balance sheet, like debtors, Waldron Limited. So in part B of this question, we are asked to correct the net profit, not the balance sheet, just the net profit. So we're only going to bring in the items which would be relevant to the net profit. That will be sales here, purchases here, not suspense, interest here, but not suspense. Neither of those, bank is a current asset or a current liability, drawings is in the balance sheet also, and neither of those, because they're both debtors, both in the balance sheet. So it's only 3 things. You go to part B. Now you write in your original net profit given to you in the question. It says a statement of corrected net profit if the net profit as per the accounts is 18,400. And then I've just written an important rule here. You add any credits and you subtract any debits. Why? Well, credits are either an extra income, which would increase the profit, hence you add, or perhaps a reduced expense, which would also increase the profit. And you subtract any debits because it could be an extra expense or it could be a reduced income. So in this situation, from correction number 1, I'm just going to go back briefly to it. From correction number 1, we had a credit sales. So we're going to add that on, that 11,300. Add that on. From number 2, we had a debit of purchases, so we're going to subtract that. And from number 3, we had a credit of interest, so I'm going to add that on as well. And when you do those 3 things, you get your corrected net profit, and your corrected net profit is 14,900. At this point, we have solved Anne Fogarty's 5 errors, and we have corrected her net profit. If this was a 100-mark question, you would also have to correct her balance sheet, but we'll have a look at that when we are in the higher level questions, and that would involve correcting the debtors or the creditors or the fixed assets, whatever it might be.